Welcome to Corrective Consciousness episode 210, the podcast where we explore the inanity of pop culture. I said that intro a lot better than the last time.
That was expertly done.
Pretty solid. Didn't flub that up. Flip. Oh shit. I'm your host,
Flames on the
vysethebold.
side of my face.
I'm your host, vysethebold, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And we have another wonderful show here for you. We have a wonderful show based off of our experiences and history and the entire library of Castlevania titles. I am a huge Castlevania nerd and nut, and I really wanted to get a chance to talk about it. We had a previous episode where we talked about Koji Igarashi's influence on the series, but that's not the only thing that that's not the only era that the series has had. So we wanted to get the opportunity to talk about the series as a whole, because I think it may be a while until we see anything new, if at all, from Castlevania, so, sadly. But I am a huge lifelong fan of Castlevania, and I just wanted to have an opportunity to talk about it. So, what's really cool about Castlevania is that it was an homage to all kinds of pop culturally culture-y things at the time. So you had the horror stuff was all like, Universal and Hammer monster stuff.
Yeah.
So
Did they go into Hammer territory?
I don't. I mean, it's hard to say because I can't put my finger on it, but I know at least they went a little outside of Universal by they have Count Orlok at some point, which is the name of the vampire in Nosferatu.
Sure.
Which,
And they have weird stuff like Legion, which I think that might just... Is that unique?
Well, Legion is based off of a biblical thing. I mean,
duh. Yeah, but it's weirdly called
Legion.
Grand Falloon in Symphony of the Night.
The U.S. version in the Japanese version is Legion. I don't know why they changed it to Grand Falloon. It doesn't make any sense. And all other versions of it are Legion, which makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But they have all kinds of other things. I mean, they have Beelzebub is one of the characters at one point. One of the main lieutenants of probably the main lieutenant of Count Dracula is Death personified, the Grim Reaper.
By the way, I just Googled, and I should point out Grand Falloon does make sense.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Just nobody gets it. It says a Grand Falloon in the Kurt Vonnegut novel Cat's Cradle is defined as a false karas, like Karass. It is a group of people who affect a shared identity or purpose, but whose mutual association is meaningless. So if you're caught up with your 1963 sci-fi, then man, this game is for you.
Wow.
That is a very specific reference, but it actually does make sense.
And a much more modern reference than what is usually made.
Yes.
I might add, because usually they do have references to things like legends and mythology and all kinds of other stuff like that. But usually it's not of super modern things. I mean, they do have references to Frank Baum's Wizard of Oz.
Do they?
Yeah, actually, you fight all three of the the partners. You fight the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow in Symphony of the Night.
I have no memory of this.
It's in the library of all places. Which
that makes sense.
Complete sense. But yeah, it's really cool what they do. They have all kinds of legends. It started off as just Bram Stoker's Dracula inspired, but there's all kinds of other like Frankenstein's monster is frequently in the series as well.
The creature.
Yeah, he is usually lightning based, which is actually kind of cool.
Well, it makes sense. Yeah, lightning brought him to life. It's based on like you said, the Universal depiction, the Boris Karloff monster.
Yeah, and the mummy
Yep, yep.
usually somewhere in there. And
The
other
werewolf.
werewolves are usually in there as well. The Wolfman.
Yeah,
Um,
the Wolfman, like as a boss. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So as much as they can get away without like actually touching on copyrights, that kind of thing. So, which is
Well,
really
that's the
really neat.
beauty of it is that like you could always argue. I mean, maybe there's likenesses like with the creature. They could
Yeah.
fudge that a little bit, but I mean, the concept of werewolves and like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Bram Stoker's Dracula, like those are not Universal's own property. That's
Well,
why everybody and their mother makes Dracula movies.
the flat-headed like neck bolted
No, I
creature.
know. That's why I said they could fudge that,
Yeah.
but Frankenstein is not Universal's own as well. That likeness is pretty damn close though.
I mean, clearly they based Count Dracula in this series as off of Bela Lugosi for
Oh,
sure.
sure. Yeah.
At least it wasn't Grandpa Monster or something like that. But they certainly have based it off of what you think of Dracula, which is the 30s Dracula movie.
Yeah, yeah.
But I guess I should give some more background on the story on the series as a whole. So one other thing that I was going to mention is some of the aesthetics are borrowed off of like Frank Frazetta style paintings and things like that.
Oh, for the game's box art?
Yeah, not only that, but like the opening, like cinematic, animation
Yeah.
of you walking up to the castles is basically, based off of barbarian imagery from the 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, Simon Belmont is basically like not Conan.
Yeah. So Simon Belmont was the first protagonist and probably most famous protagonist in the Castlevania series, and he is they're supposed to be in Transylvania, in Romania, in a fictionalized version of it, and it Dracula, menaces the town and usually kidnaps a girl in the process. As a lot of NES titles tended to be like, and it was just a place where they could experiment. Konami, the company that made it, could experiment with fun pop culture references and horror stuff. So when this released, it was um, unusual for a few reasons. There weren't very many horror games at the time, and not even horror themed action games at that. So there was Haunted House for the Atari 2600, and you had a few personal computer titles that were horror based, but most of them weren't even action titles. If you had a horror themed game, it was usually like an adventure game or something like
Yeah.
that.
Or weirdly an RPG if it's Sweet Home.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, that Sweet Home was much later than the Castlevania. It was
Yeah,
a
it was.
few years after. But this was cool because this was something brand new. I mean, this is an action title based around a character who fights with a whip, which is, of course, a call to what else could it be? Indiana Jones.
Luke
Um,
Skywalker. Oh, yeah, Indiana Jones, yes.
so like you have all these pop culture influences. You have the barbarian imagery. You have Universal monsters, and you have Indiana Jones all in one. And they crafted this title that was very challenging but a lot of fun. The aesthetics and the music of Castlevania are bar none
The
some of
music just kills.
some of the best in video game history.
Like level
Um,
1 of Castlevania 1 and Castlevania 3, the two different tracks, they're unbelievable. Yeah, and they remixed that in Castlevania 3 as well.
Yeah, I mean or, the very first music track, in level one of Castlevania 3 is one of the most iconic video game songs. It's just so good. I really love everything having to do with Castlevania, but the music is probably my favorite part of it on top of everything. that, and I just love all the references and mythology and all that stuff. So the story goes, after his subsequent defeat, Dracula usually reappears every 100 years, and they kind of get away with that as time goes on because that really hampers their timeline.
Yeah.
They can only go so far, and go so far back before you it doesn't even make sense in Europe anymore. You know what I mean? So, but also, Dracula is based off of a real person.
Yeah.
Vlad Tepes.
Yeah, I believe it's Tepish.
Dracula, who was a Romanian king who was terrible. He was terrifying. He was nicknamed Vlad the Impaler because he had people impaled in front of his castle.
No, my one of the stories that I like, I forgot why it happened. I think he had issued some payment to some farmer for something. And the next day, the farmer came back to his castle and he's like, "Hey, buddy, thanks, but you overpaid me by a couple coins or whatever." And Vlad was like, "Yeah, I know. That was a test of your honesty, and you just passed. Good thing you did, because if you kept that shit, it would have killed you." It's like, oh my god.
Jesus Christ. I think he was also related to the real Elizabeth Bathory, who
really,
yeah.
I mean, I know that both of those people are iconic in their own ways, but really, they're both connected as well. That's just begging for
Kingdom of Hungary.
lore.
It's not too far. Elizabeth Bathory is known also as the Bloody Countess, who
she literally bathed in blood.
Bathed in the blood of local maidens, virgins.
It's such a cartoon thing to do, and somebody actually did this shit.
She did it for real.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was put in prison eventually, thankfully.
Yeah. Oh, really?
But yeah,
we're running out of maidens.
She was locked in a bricked room. Oh God.
Yeah, that's not gonna lie. That's cruel.
She deserves it. She deserved the death penalty. She died at 54. So yeah. But anyway, so the series has always just been so much fun. There were concorded right at the same time. They released the first Castlevania games all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So you had it on the MSX computer. Was one version, one game, and the other was on the NES. There's some speculation that one, was released before the other, but they were basically released at exactly the same time. They would have had to been made at the same time.
But by the way, speaking of release dates, you know how there was eventually wasn't there a Western PC release eventually?
I think there was a DOS.
Yeah, the DOS version, because maybe it was DOS, because I saw weirdly the DOS version run at a Games Done Quick event, and just a little quirk. You know how in the credits it says Simon Belmondo? They hadn't really worked out the kinks in the translation yet. In DOS it says Belmont.
Huh.
How about that?
So that's actually a good point. In the Japanese version, he's called Belmondo, and it actually makes more sense.
Yeah, the Japanese way of saying it, Belmondo.
But it also makes more sense in Romanian. You wouldn't have just Belmont. It wouldn't end in just a consonant.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, he's Shimon.
Yeah, Shimon, in Gurren Lagann.
Shimon Belmondo. But we know him as Simon Belmont, and when I was a little kid, our imaginations just went wild with this because it's just the music brought so much to the game. You just hop around the screen and whip and get hurt a lot
lot.
Yeah, there just was so many like the atmosphere that the music and aesthetics brought to it were just so phenomenal that you always wanted to think about this world that they lived in. Just such a cool thing. And
just swimming with monsters.
At the time, a lot of NES games were ports of arcade titles, and this was a title like along with the original Mega Man, like around that same time, where it was a really good long form game that was made specifically for the Famicom and NES.
Yeah. Although I mean, this was made specifically for the Famicom and the NES, but you want to go ahead and remind us what influenced this in the first place, the arcade title?
Actually, you could go ahead on that one.
All right, you probably know it better than I do, but there was an arcade game that I think you can get on PS4 and probably Switch and Xbox. I wouldn't be surprised if you get on Xbox as well, called Haunted Castle. Which
Haunted Castle came a lot later, actually.
Oh, did it come later? Okay.
So
it's an upgrade then, kind of.
Haunted Castle came out after Castlevania 2, so we're not even to that point yet.
Because the reason I mentioned that is that it's 86. Okay, because the reason I mentioned it is that its opening is very similar to Castlevania's, just with way better graphics, but the level design is like completely different.
So, the arcade game in question is actually kind of a remake, a retelling of the original Castlevania game.
Yeah, and speaking of which, you said that Dracula shows up and usually captures a girl or whatever. In OG Castlevania, I think he just exists and you need to stop him. I don't think there was a love interest. But like in Haunted Castle, like you're just walking down the street like with your fiance, and Dracula just swoops in and grabs her and leaves, and you're like, "What the hell?" And then
yeah, it's very Ghosts of Goblins.
Yeah,
very Ghosts of Goblins.
Just right in front of everybody.
I mean, at least you had the decency.
Her away. You're like, are you kidding me?
At least you had the decency to have a tux on.
Yeah, that was pretty great. But I just love that though. Like, it's not like, oh no, I wish I could have been there to save her. Like, he just walks right the fuck up and just takes her, and you're like, and so then the game starts.
Every once in a while, I think about the opening of Ghosts and Goblins. It's like you were hanging out with your underwear with that girl, like in the middle of a graveyard, like when this all happened. Like
you were in that goth phase in like the 19 like what?
He's
80s,
like lounging
70s.
in just his underwear, and she's fully clothed. Like what?
That's just how you live your life, man. Don't get on my case, Mom.
So Ghosts and Goblins. This was obviously inspired by Ghosts and Goblins because Ghosts and Goblins is a little bit before this. So Ghosts and Goblins is the probably OG.
Horror action-ish title.
Horror action game. That's also difficult.
Where you fight. I know Satan? The final boss is some devil name. What was it? Beelzebub.
He's Lucifer.
That was the first one. Was Lucifer?
I think it goes Lucifer, and then there's like another devil.
Yeah, like
that.
in the Sega version in America they call him Loki, which everybody knows is bullshit. That might have been Satan or something.
Yeah,
he's like
Lucifer and Satan are two different characters.
Because like the Genesis one, the Ghost and Goblin or the Ghouls and Ghost boss, like I think I forgot if I mentioned this on the podcast, but he is straight up the red monster on the cover of the Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide, like the AD&D. He is just that guy, like directly.
But yeah, moving on.
Yeah.
Around the same time, they also released a game that was localized as Vampire Killer on the MSX.
Oh yeah, and which happens to be the name of the track of the first level in the NES game. That da 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 da.
Yeah, so good. So this game played a lot differently. So this had more exploration elements to it. Have you ever seen this one played?
I don't think so.
So the idea of this one is that you were supposed to search for keys. So you had to like whip like walls and objects and try to find like 4 keys so you can move on. Also, the MSX was very bad at scrolling, so it was like every screen was a static screen. The Famicom did, for the time, actually was super advanced. The Famicom and NES had better scrolling than even PCs did at the time.
Mario, like if you go back and actually look, Mario, like Super Mario Brothers, that is a smooth game.
No, that's why it's it's held in the esteem that it is.
Because
Nothing.
like a lot of games, like you walk to the right and you see like the blocks change color and load like more to the right, more to the right. But Mario is just smooth the whole way through.
Yeah, there are only a couple platformers before Super Mario Brothers, and it would be Pac-Land,
Oh
which
jeez.
isn't nearly as good, and Ghosts and Goblins again.
Yeah, that
Is
one you're kind of slow in that game, so you don't have to worry about fast scroll speed, so its scrolling was smooth enough. But Mario was
nothing
crazy.
controlled as buttery smooth as Super Mario
Oh
Brothers.
my god, yeah.
But yeah, back on Vampire Killer, it is I would say that it is that title is not as thought of fondly as the rest of them. People like it for how that the fact that it's interesting. It's different than the NES title. It's like it's a separate game.
Yeah, it's just like an amusing novelty. Kind of like Haunted Castle, because that game is not fun. But it's just like, oh, look at this.
See, I guess we should talk about Haunted Castle, but Haunted Castle is basically like an arcade retelling. Like most of the time, it was the other way around, right?
Yeah, but it is also an absolutely merciless quarter muncher.
Yeah, in fact, Konami's arcade titles from this era, I actually don't like nearly as much as their early '90s
Like
stuff.
it is extremely hard, and you can run out of continues. Like you can't even, like there comes a point where you can't pay for more. It's like, no, that is a game over.
Yeah, Contra and Super Contra are the same way in the arcade. Yeah, and they're brutally hard. They don't control nearly as well as their NES
Yeah.
counterparts. In both cases. In fact, I like the NES versions of Castlevania and Contra and Super C much better than their arcade counterparts.
Yeah,
Even though
Haunted
the arcade
Castle is
counterparts are interesting.
Yeah, Haunted Castle is straight bullshit. Like it's gorgeous to look at, but that game is bullshit. And you had mentioned before that Contra in the arcade is a vertical screen, so like the
Yeah,
climbing levels are a bit better, but the standard levels really are
they
pretty rough because
suffer.
you can't see as far ahead. Whereas on the NES, it focuses more on the horizontal aspect of it. Super C though, I don't know. Is it the same problem?
Same problem. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that the thing is like when when I was growing up, one of the first websites that I ever went to was the Castlevania Dungeon,
Yeah, yeah.
which turned out later. I later found out was actually run by my now friend Kurt Kalata,
Yeah, he's
and
the hardcore gaming 101 guy.
who runs Hardcore Gaming 101. But like back then, I didn't know that. In fact, I got to know Kurt pretty darn well, and then I found out that he was the writer and creator of the website that I went to the most as a kid, which
Yeah.
is hilarious. I couldn't even be starstruck because he was already my friend.
Yeah, you already
Like,
knew him.
yeah, yeah. Like it was really funny. I started talking to him. I was like, "Hey, you ever go to this website called the Castlevania Dungeons?" And he's just like, "Yeah, that was my website." And I was just like, "What?"
Yeah, what are the odds you found the one guy in the world that did that?
Exactly. Yeah, and he happened to be in New Jersey, where I was from.
It was also another moment like that when you asked Mr. Ryu if he'd ever heard of or seen Rikio. That's my
Yeah,
favorite.
and he was
He's
wearing.
wearing the shirt. He just looks
He,
down at his own shirt.
he's like, no.
Yeah, who owns a Rikio shirt? And like he was wearing it at the time you asked him because it just like didn't click, and he's like, nope.
Looking back at it, I must have seen like the shirt out of the corner of my
Yeah,
eye
maybe
and
it
didn't think
subconsciously
about
went
it.
into your head. You're like, you ever seen
Yeah,
this movie? That's so funny.
but it was really funny at the time, and he's just like no. This is so funny. But yeah. Moving on from that. So what was also a cool feature about the Castlevania games is that you had sub weapons in addition to your whip. You could upgrade your whip a couple times in most of the games, or it would be fully powered depending on which version of the games you were playing.
Yeah.
But to make it longer and more powerful. But there was also sub weapons. So there's the most common one and first one that you usually get is the knife.
Yeah, yeah.
It's also the weakest one, but it's also pretty darn effective.
And it costs little to use. Don't the others cost more hearts? It's like a knife is like what, one? You just chuck it.
And especially as time goes on, the knife becomes more and more worth it. Like in Dracula X, the knife, and also in Symphony of the Night, the knife is quite effective actually, because
speaking
they throw
of
them
the knife,
quickly.
Yeah, you do. You can really go to town with that. But speaking of the knife being effective, by the way, it was really funny. Speaking of like not realizing you known him all along, Kurt himself did this. He had found some Japanese tweet that posted an interesting thing you could do with a knife in Castlevania 1.
Oh,
and he was like, yo, look at this. And then somebody linked him to his own article where he reported on it.
It was Castlevania 3. But,
it was 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, where like when you're fighting Frankenstein's monster, if you throw the knife and time it perfectly, because lightning comes down periodically in that fight, if you hit the monster with it, like as lightning comes down, if you would ever think to do that on an NES game, then it deals something like 5 bars of health. It's like a lot of damage for what it is, because you channel the lightning. Who would think that the lightning was functional in an NES title? That's crazy. That's like something Kojima would do.
So, yeah, the MSX title though was very clunky. Well, I should go back to sub weapons. So after that, the most common one is probably the axe, which is even more helpful than the knife, because the knife you could throw it in forever, full screen in a horizontal direction. So that's pretty great, especially when you have a limited range with your whip.
Yeah, it's minor range, but it's a great, despite throwing a knife, it's actually a great defensive item because you get to stay out of the enemy's range.
Absolutely. Well, the axe is very similar, but it gets thrown in an arc, and it's also
so
stronger.
you can catch enemies above and below you without entering their line of fire, unless they're like the skeletons and they also happen to throw in an arc.
It's extremely useful in the early games because you are at a disadvantage on the vertical end, because jumping in the game is very stiff intentionally.
Yeah, it's cool. Like you mentioned this already, that the game, but it's very Ghost and Goblins style of jumping. Like when you jump, you commit to it, and if you get hit, you get blown back, and wherever you land, you land.
Yeah, whereas with something like Super Mario Brothers, you control your jump midair.
You can move a little bit in the air. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you can work against the inertia and things like that. So, but after that, you also have the holy water, which tends to be my favorite and is also one of the most useful.
It lingers, so if an enemy has a lot of HP, it'll deal tons of damage, and you could just like spam lock or like stun lock death. And I think Castlevania 1, you could stun lock death and just
Medusa. Yeah.
Oh yeah, not even the Medusa heads, just Medusa. Yeah, you can really ruin their day. And when we eventually get to the 3D Castlevania games, maybe even some of the 2D ones do it. When you have invisible platforms, you could just chuck the holy water, and if it lands in the air, then you can walk on it.
Yeah, I think a lot of speedrunners really use the holy water the most.
Yeah, I mean it is just murder. Although I think well, they'll use the holy water for particular bosses. I think usually they go for the crosses, because you can really fuck everybody up with crosses.
We're gonna get to that, but holy water is also kind of used as a grenade.
That's the whole thing. Yeah, particular bosses go down immediately with that shit if you just keep throwing it, but usually they go for crosses because they have a huge range and also boomerang back, and I think they cost like half or maybe even nothing if you catch your own thrown cross.
Yeah, so that's the next common one. You also have probably one of the rarer ones, but it's also the most helpful, the boomerang or cross. So you throw them, and they're very similar to knives. Except
but they come back. Yeah.
So you can end up getting 2-3 hits on a bad guy.
Especially because when you throw them, they eventually reach an end of their path. That's what coming back means. Like they go forward, they reach the end of however far they go, kind of like linger for a second, like and then come back. So if you can position yourself so you catch an enemy where it's far enough away that it's at the end of the throw, it'll just linger on it for a little bit and do some extra hits.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not easy to do because you have to, like, position yourself just so, but if you do it, then it pays off.
There's also the stopwatch as well,
Yes.
which freezes enemies on the screen. It is considered by most people to be less helpful because most bosses are not susceptible to it.
Yeah, and sometimes, like, if you get it at the wrong time, you effectively turn enemies into just an obstacle you have to pass through anyway. You can't go like, oh, now I can sneak by. Like, if it's in a position you have to jump to or something, then too bad, you're still killing it. The good news is it can't fight back at least.
I think there's only one boss in the entire series that is affected by it, and it's the first boss in the first game.
By the way, I do love, by the way, when stuff like that happens, where it turns out a boss does have a mundane weakness like that.
Yeah,
like in Final Fantasy VII, like Ruby Weapon is susceptible to paralysis, and it's like, oh really? Or like, what a weird game to bring up. But in Galarians, when your meter fills and you go berserk, your movement is extremely slow, but you're invincible, and if you come in contact with anybody, their head explodes. And this works on the first boss, and it's like, oh, it's just over.
So, moving on from that, I was going to say that the MSX title is a lot stiffer, and it doesn't have that scrolling, and it's just not as good of a game. So really where it's at is the original Castlevania. It was actually released first on Famicom Disk System in Japan, and didn't come to cartridge until later.
I forgot about that. Yeah, you can look up the little bit of a different soundtrack style and quality. I prefer the NES version.
I like the NES version better in the end, but it's still interesting.
Yeah.
Nonetheless. And then you know, this was actually a really big success. Everybody really loved this game. It was one of those games that, like, if you didn't own it, you rented it all the time, because Castlevania was just so much fun. And it was a great title. It was, and looking back on the NES, it's up there in like maybe the top three titles that you would want to play. I would say that, like, Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3, Castlevania 1 and 3, and the two Contra games, and Mega Man 2. You know, those are the games.
Mega Man
for the
2
NES
is a freaking banger. Yeah.
Those are the games, and I can't forget Zelda, Legend of Zelda, and Metroid. But those are like the cream of the crop of NES games right there. So, you know, it really helped define the NES as a powerhouse, and really helped Konami, become a very popular brand. So moving on from that, the next year they came out with Castlevania 2, and immediately, like, made people scratch their heads.
Well, I mean, there are reasons for that other than being, like Zelda 2, like, oh, it's not Castlevania 1 again. This plays very differently.
Yeah, 2s on the Nintendo tended to be, like, the second title in a series tended to be a lot different than the original, like, especially with Zelda 2. And Castlevania 2 wanted you to have an even larger experience.
Yeah, like Castlevania 2 still had, like, I mean, Zelda, even the combat was different. But in Castlevania 2, you still kill enemies the same way, but you would talk to townspeople. There was a day-night cycle. It was
very
pretty
ambitious.
Out there.
You
have to go to a shop and buy an item so you can kill, like, Dracula's heart with it. It's like, yeah, it's a lot.
You leveled up in it. You got, like, stronger equipment over time. You had to find where the mansions were, which was where the dungeon.
That's very Zelda-ish. Yeah. But the thing that I think is frustrating, though, is that, like, oh, okay, different gameplay mechanics. That's weird. You get used to it. But what I find frustrating is that you talk to townspeople to get, like, hints or advice, but some of them are just lying.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the hell? Like why would you have reason to doubt them? They thought that was fun. Yeah. Like, so you're just wasting your time.
I think in the original Japanese one, it was more obvious that they were lying through some kind of tell. You know what I mean?
That would make sense, because in the American version, it's just like, oh, you want to go here, and like, no, you don't. And like, how would you know this?
Yeah, and it was also a poor translation, and also it didn't quite make it didn't make it obvious that you were supposed to be looking out for lying townsfolk.
Yeah.
So this game is very it was one of those games that you had to subscribe to Nintendo Power in order to
Yeah,
beat.
this was frustrating enough that it was the very first ever Angry Nintendo Nerd video.
Yeah, before he was called the Angry Video Game Nerd.
Yeah, this was OG.
But the cover is like super awesome and iconic, but it's also a
That's
copy.
the Dungeons and Dragons.
It's a Ravenloft cover.
That's amazing.
It is straight up a like theft.
Yeah, like if you look at that vampire's face and you look up the Ravenloft comic, like it's not even an homage. It's just like they digitized the picture.
It's straight up theft. They literally just put Simon Belmont in, on the cover of an already existing D&D cover.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, wait, they didn't digitize it. This was like the painted look. So, yeah,
No,
so it's even worse. They just took it.
No, it's just straight up theft. And the cover of the original Castlevania is very clearly a like a tracing of a Frazetta.
And Golden Axe love to do that too.
Yeah. So, anyway, it still looked cool because it was based off of cool things that already existed. Yeah, I mean, Castlevania 2, the saving grace of its legacy is mostly that, like, eventually the series returned to something similar to what they had in mind when they were making this game. But very few people like to go back to it, and if you do go back to it, a lot of people suggest playing like heavily ROM hacked versions of this game, because you have people, people have changed the townspeople to not lie anymore.
Not only that, one thing I'll bet
fix the translation.
Well, not only that, but whenever it turns night or day, it either says something like "What a horrible night to have a curse" for night, and for day it's like the sun vanquishes the darkness or whatever. But you have to just sit there and wait for the text bubble. Like, what a horrible night to have a and you're like, can I play the fucking game? Like, it just interrupts you.
It's very disrupting. But the game is mostly going to be remembered for its music. It probably has
Bloody Tears.
Bloody Tears is the most iconic.
That is up there with Vampire
series.
Killer. It's way up there.
It is amazing. It is one of the best video game songs of all time. It's really, really
very
good.
Very good.
And so a lot of people will remember Castlevania 2 for its contributions in ideas and its music, but the gameplay just isn't there.
Yeah, it did have really good ideas.
Going back to it is very rough, even for people who knew it back then. So I didn't even get into the mansion. So one of the most iconic things about Castlevania is its boss fights. The boss fights are extremely lame in Castlevania 2. They're very short.
Like Carmilla is just like a face that floats around. It looks like they didn't have time to finish the design. It's just like, it's a face. It reminds me of that, like, the Transformers game that we never got, the Famicom one, where like one of the final bosses is just like the Decepticon symbol, and you're like, are you kidding me? So yeah, Carmilla is just like a gray face. You fight that, like, okay, I guess.
Yeah, the bosses are very easy. You could basically just spam them until they die.
Or in Death's case, you can just walk past it.
Yeah.
You just straight up, you just go. You just not fight him. You just go. You go to the next room, you're done. Just walk right by him.
The mansions are full of trap floors that are invisible, that you have to constantly throw holy water on the ground in order to detect.
Yeah, this is the opposite of what I was saying earlier. Like, see if there's a path you can walk on. This is when the pitfalls look like the floor. You think you can walk on it, but you can't. So that you have to throw the holy water to see where it falls through. Like, it's a pain in the ass.
It's really annoying game design.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not even like, oh, they didn't think about it. Like, they did, and it's annoying, and it's supposed to be annoying.
Also, there is a time limit on the game that you didn't know about
Oh yeah.
until you would try to beat the game and it told you that you sucked
You know, we'll get to this probably next time, but Castlevania has 64 has a time limit, kind of, but
it's kind of fun though.
it doesn't give you a bad ending. It's just interesting if you mess it up.
Yeah, exactly. Then let's see here. Also, it had one of the worst and most complicated password systems. They had O's that look like zeros and zeros that look like O's.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and also the passwords were very long and complicated. Um, Luckily, in the Japanese players actually didn't have to deal with that at all because again, it was on the Famicom Disk System, which
That's
had rewrite
right.
ability. So nowadays, you can actually get like a ROM hacked version that is they clean up all of that stuff. They give you a save file. They give you they make a better translation, and they also fix all the lying townspeople. So it's a much better experience. If you're gonna do that, don't play this game vanilla. Definitely play the ROM hacked version. Also, there's ROM hacked versions with the map in it, with an actual map, which is
Oh, that's useful.
greatly needed because this game is very confusing to get around in, and there's no map. So
Yeah, at least in Zelda, like it's overhead, and even in Zelda 2, the overworld stuff is overhead. Castlevania, everything's side scrolling, so it's disorienting.
yeah, very very much so.
Like again, I appreciate the idea, but it's very confusing.
Then after that, you also have Honda Castle, which we've gone through ad nauseum. But what I was actually going to bring up regarding this one is when when I read about this title on I only knew about this title at all because I was a very frequent arcade goer. I was a big video game fan as a kid, and all my entire life I love video games. And so, like, I was always checking out the arcade and seeing what new titles were. I had never seen this one, Haunted Castle, as a cabinet. I never seen it, like a real copy of it. Even still to this day, I've only ever seen like emulations of it. And when I found out that there was an arcade version of this, I was so determined to play it because it just first of all he had sprite rips of this game on the website, so it looked really neat. Like the
Yeah.
graphics actually have a lot of detail to them, so it looked cool to me. However, when you go and you play it, it is stiff as hell and it's hard as shit.
Yeah, like to put things into perspective, the boss of the first level is basically Yellow Devil from Mega Man.
Yes.
Like they don't play, and it hits really hard. You do not have as much health as you think you do.
Not only that, but there are constant gotcha traps throughout that whole
Yes.
game.
Oh, my absolute favorite was watching Mr. Ryu play for through the game for the first time. Do you remember? I think this was also in the first level. There's a part where you're walking up on some stone platforms, and eventually, like a torch falls over
Oh
or
yeah.
something and
Mm-hmm.
lights the grass below the platforms on fire.
Yep.
Like just so now like watch out, the ground is fire, so stay on the platforms. Mr. Ryu just walks right on the grass because that hadn't happened yet. And I think I had said something like I would get back on the platforms, and he goes, why? And like just perfect comedic timing. That's the moment the torch fell over, and he just fucking died. And it's like what? It's like the most gotcha thing. It was amazing.
Boy, was I disappointed when I finally got my hands on MAME and then I played this. God
Yep,
damn.
yep.
And for the longest time, that was the only way you could play it because it didn't. There wasn't a console port until the PS2. And now it's very readily available. You can actually play it on the Switch or the PS4 if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it. It sucks. It's a curiosity at best. If you want to see Simon Belmont throw a bomb that's like
Yeah, I forgot
a
about
sub
that. Yeah.
weapon that is very unusual. But yeah, it's not it's not great. But then Castlevania: The Adventure came out on Game Boy.
Before we get to that though, like we're getting a little long on this one. I think we might have to come back to this one next time because we're pushing 45
and
minutes.
We can continue this.
Yeah, we could do a Sega thing. We could do a Castlevania thing.
Yeah. We'll do it. Good call, Lotus.
Castlevania Adventure though is an interesting title for sure though.
Oh yeah, and readily available as well. So go on to fan stuff.
Yeah. So we have a few comments here. Connor says, I love the Condemned games. I remember seeing footage of the first one right around the release of the 360, I think it was a launch title, and being absolutely blown away by the graphics, particularly the lighting and enemy animations. Sure, it looks quite dated now, but at the time it was such a huge step up from the previous generation. Really fun games too, with an incredibly tense atmosphere. The sequel was a bit disappointing and had some bizarre design choices, like changing the character models of the protagonist.
Yeah, the character didn't look the same.
Really?
Completely revamped. Yeah.
Oh, weird.
They made him into like a pretty boy, but he was like a middle-aged like Hispanic guy in the first one. It was really kind of weird.
So changing the protagonist and some supporting characters look more generic, but it did have some amazing levels and set pieces. It did end on a cliffhanger story-wise, so it's a shame we never got a third one. School Filmer is just really brief. The only delisted games I can remember are mostly licensed ones, so don't have much to say about this topic. Sorry. It's all good.
Fair enough.
Living Corpse is a few things. One, I think I missed this last time, so I apologize. But he says Arrow Films is releasing a complete box set of the Gamera films, having all 12 of them this August, which is fucking wild.
I think I might be in the minority here. Oh, maybe I'm not, but I think only like the trilogy, like the modern
Gamera
trilogy, is worth watching. The old ones are. There's a reason why they're on MST3K.
So he says, I was mistaken about something with DBZ. I said that Android 20, Dr. Gero, just killed Yamcha by impaling him to the chest. Apparently, no, I had flaked on this one. He almost killed Yamcha. The Z Fighters managed to get medical help. Good for him. So I guess Yamcha died twice then, not 3 times? Because it was the Cyberman and the Boo kill everyone attack. And then the other comment, I think even censoring cheesecake is bad. I've learned if you give them an inch to censor something petty or small, they'll try to go a mile on bigger, more important things. People will roll their eyes over it when it's cleavage, but I'm up in arms about it being censored. But people will roll their eyes... Oh, I see. People will roll their eyes like when I'm up in arms about something like cleavage being censored, but are missing that cleavage is only the beginning. Eventually it'll be something else. Like that you like, or something political, or the fact that a character's gay or trans, or artistic value being censored because its morals are offensive, bullshit like that, basically. Mm-hmm. Yeah, censorship is like a weird, surprisingly arbitrary thing. It like depends on the mood of like the censor, I guess, which is some bullshit.
I would say that the only thing that I actually don't have any problem with sexuality or anything like that in games, except when it's applied to young women, in particular.
When it gets like creepy pedo.
Far too many of the games out there that are cheesecakey, even like something like the Senran Kagura. I mean, those characters are
they definitely have a couple of kids in those games.
Well, not even that. They're just straight up high schoolers. They're minors. Like almost all the characters are minors. So.
Yeah, but like But even then, like among them, there are like the younger ones, and it's like.
So like I'm not down with that. I'm okay with sexuality in games, no problem, as long as they're adults and it's consensual.
Yeah, you were never into the whole like lolly thing because the whole thing is just off-putting.
Don't even get me started. Don't even get me started.
And by the way, I love that that's the term that applies to it, considering that Lolita, like where the term comes from, is based on like a fucking pedophile.
It's a novel about a pedophile. Yeah.
Yeah, that you're not supposed to be rooting for the protagonist of that one.
No, he's a piece of shit.
Yeah. So Dracologist says, Heretic 2 is alright, don't be mean. It's a decent third-person shooter. To be fair, I only barely tried it, but I don't remember caring for it that much.
I gotta disagree with that.
You can double down on that one?
Yeah.
And then Navid Taj, I think possibly first-time commenter, says, Codename Gordon is delisted. I haven't heard of that one, but you can still get it with a secret code in Steam.
So right when Steam launched, Codename Gordon was part of the package that you got when you downloaded Half-Life 2.
Oh.
What you had a whole bunch of stuff. So there was like a Half-Life edition version of Peggle. So like there were like Half-Life enemies in Peggle.
That's wild.
Like in the background and stuff. Like it was actually pretty funny. But you also had like other things that you could get on there, and one of them was a fan-made title that was basically officially sanctioned. That was a 2D Half-Life game called Codename Gordon.
Oh.
And it was a fun game. It was really cool. But I think eventually the developer of the game did something weird. Like they went under and then they sold it to somebody, and then they replaced their splash page with like a porn head or something like that.
Okay.
I'm not incredibly well versed in it, but apparently that was part of the reason why it got delisted.
Yeah, that'll do it. All right, so for our question, this is from School Filmer. What are the hardest games you've played and possibly completed? Some may argue that the Soulsborne games are the hardest, but I say La Mulana is much harder than those games.
Oh, La Mulana, yeah.
Cryptic puzzles and tricky jumping are just some of the things that make games that makes that game very, very difficult. Another contender, this is something we would not really know about, would be Jet Set Willy for the ZX Spectrum.
Oh, sure.
Or the Retrospect remake I played so many years ago. That game is extremely difficult, mostly due to the fact that if you fall to your demise from a different screen, you'll keep losing lives in an endless loop of pain. Oh, that's bullshit. Oh, and all the enemies too. So there you go. So hardest games. This is a weird one. I don't know if it counts as hardest, because maybe I just didn't know how to do it right. But Hitman 2, Silent Assassin, that game is fucking impossible.
That game is like critically acclaimed, and at the time
I get it, but that game is fucking impossible.
When that game came out, I could not play it. It was just well above me.
I beat the first level wrong. You know,
Me too.
like because you're supposed to like pass off some flowers or put on a disguise at like some extremely brief time window. You mess it up, go fuck yourself. Yeah, I just shot everybody. Yeah. And in level 2, you can't do that. And like I just didn't know what to do. That was it.
Rainbow Six is like that too. It was way too
Rainbow
heady
Six
for
was
me.
Rough. Like you only have like if you're extremely lucky, you will be barely left alive after you're hit once, but you'll probably be one shot by anything.
And your entire squad will die most likely.
Yeah, because they were going for like a realistic take. This is more just final boss material, but the end of Galarian's Ash, that final boss can go fuck itself so hard. Like, he just has way too much health. It gets to a point where you're like, I'm going to run out of recharge items, dude. Like, please fall down, otherwise this fight is literally impossible and I just don't know it.
In terms of probably like one of the hardest games that I own and have played, I've never beaten this with any... with any sort of accomplishment. I kind of just credit fed it through it, and I don't even know if I beat it because it's just that hard and that difficult. But Escaluda 2 is legendary.
I don't know that one.
It's a cave game.
There you go.
Just look up the final boss. Amongst cave bosses that are like, you know, cave bosses are known to be ridiculous. You can't even barely see your character, you know.
Well, I want to see you. I want to see you beat Musahime-sama Futari on the hardest difficulty. The final boss, where the whole screen is purple with enemy bullets.
Escaluda 2 and Musahime-sama Futari are probably their two hardest titles.
Like it's like, come on, like, you gotta be kidding me.
I cannot play those games. Like I can get pretty far in them. Like I really like them, but like it's not worth it for me to get good at it. Let's just say that.
I'm trying to think, because like, I don't think I would also put the Soulsborne games, because you can hack away and learn enemy patterns. It's like it's hard to accomplish certain things in those games, but like just beating them, like you learn how to play it right, and you get it like you learn how to get it down. I would say there are only like some bosses that are just like, no matter what, they're just so fucking hard where you have to cheese them. So I don't know if I put Soulsborne, even though those games are kind of notorious for it. Like they're quite hard, but I don't know about like just making me tear my hair out in anger.
I mean, I would go with something like as simple as a Binding of Isaac, because like
you can have good runs, but yes, that game can get very hard. Actually, I don't even know if I deserve to say this because I've only played it for like an hour, but like Darkest Dungeon, because a lot of that game is die rolls for attacks, and it's just like fucking bullshit. Like I like a lot of people like that game, and I get it. The aesthetic is so good, but the basic gameplay, I just don't like it. Like it's just frustrating to deal with. Like you get into a fight and like your attacks just keep missing and enemies do too much damage. It's like, come on, man. I just started the game. It shouldn't be like this hard, like already. It just drives me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, things like games like Wizardry are just like that, like actual dice rolls.
Yeah, like, dude.
Yeah, that stuff is
it drives me crazy when you could just have a bad run, like, and I don't mean a bad Isaac run, because you could salvage that, even though I wouldn't. But in Darkest Dungeon, like if you just keep rolling ones, I don't know, fuck you. Like you're just fated not to do well this time, I guess.
One of my biggest accomplishments was beating was it Superstar Soldier on the hardest difficulty, on the PC Engine. I would consider that a really nice accomplishment. It's not the hardest shooter in the world, but like on the hardest difficulty, it got really pretty difficult. So like I would say that's a really good accomplishment.
I'm trying to think of other just straight up like brutally hard games.
Yeah.
Because usually the games that you play, like, I mean, obviously they're gonna offer some kind of challenge, but like,
I mean, oh my god, this whole game's a brick wall.
I didn't play that. I did hear that the Wii version.
No problem though.
Well, I did hear the Wii version calmed down the boost boss, because apparently the boost boss is bullshit on the GameCube.
Yeah.
But I never played 2. I don't know. I mean, Hollow Knight, like the Godslayer DLC, I'm not gonna fucking bother. But I beat the game, the regular game. It was very good.
Yeah, and that's really hard. I did the Path of Pain in that, and that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in a video game.
I was considering doing the Path of Pain, but when I realized that there's no damn way I'm doing the Godslayer, I was like, oh well, perfection's not going to be achieved then, so I just won't bother with Path of Pain either. Yeah. So I just got 108%.
Path of Pain is probably the most difficult thing I've ever accomplished.
I tried the first leg of it. I was like, I don't have the patience for this shit.
It took me several days to beat that.
Yeah, like I was able to do the White Castle in general, White Palace, which was already hard. Path of Pain, again, once I discovered I wasn't doing Godslayer, I'm like, I don't need to bother with Path of Pain. Fuck it. I like rage quit.
I got to the very end of Path of Pain, and I got killed by the very last guy.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Because, like, the way that you have to do it is it's an extremely difficult platforming challenge.
Yes.
And you cannot mess up anywhere. And I got... After practicing, I got all the way through it, and you just have to fight a pretty easy bad guy, but you're exhausted by that point.
Yes.
And you also probably have used up all of your soul energy on.
That's the whole thing. I know what the enemy is, and it's not that hard, but you can't sleepwalk through it either. Like you might be like, he hit me a couple times, so like,
and he's just straight up killed me, and I was devastated.
You know what that reminds me of? Through it. Did you ever do the Coliseum of Fools?
No.
Because, man, challenge number 3 of that just keeps going.
Oh, wait, no, I beat that. I beat the Coliseum of Fools. Yeah.
You beat the third challenge, the final one?
I think so, yeah.
Because that one's not a platforming monster. That's just an endurance run against enemies. I died toward the end of that as well. That is also not fun.
Yeah, no, I did the entire Coliseum. The only thing I didn't do in that game was the that Godslayer DLC. Fuck that, man.
Like it's not even worth it. Like fuck
it's not fun. It's way too.
Well, that's the thing. Like a boss rush. Like I don't want to do the same boss rush like 4 times, because I'm not giving myself all 4 handicaps at the same time. Go fuck yourself. I'm not doing the same boss rush 4 times and then unlocking the next boss rush for 4 times and then the next one and then finally fight like 41, 42 bosses in a row where the final one is the final boss but with an additional phase. Go fuck yourself. Like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
I don't know what you get from that, but it's not worth it.
An otherwise great game hampered by that DLC.
Yeah, that feels like the Binding of Isaac Afterbirth plus DLC. Like, it's like DLC that was added for like spite. Like, here's a challenge, motherfucker. And it's like, come on.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I wasn't a fan.
Yeah.
But
you know what? Resident Evil 0 on hard mode. That's a good one. Because Resident Evil 0 is not bad, but hard mode is like Resident Evil 1, the remake on hard mode. You know, Resident Evil Remake is harder than Resident Evil 1 for sure. But, like, RE0 on hard mode is next level. I was not expecting... Because, like, when I was Let's Playing the game, I was like, I want to platinum this game. I know I'm going to come back and do hard mode later anyway. Whatever. It is way hard. And what I didn't realize at the time is that in Resident Evil 1's remake... you can transfer your save data. Like, do you want, like, you got clear data. Want to start a new game? Yes. What difficulty? So you can take your Infinite Rocket Launcher to hard mode, which is kind of bullshit in your favor. In RE0, you can't do that. You have to go in vanilla. And it is way hard. Like, I can't believe I made it through that. That was excruciating.
I got one here that I totally forgot that I plowed through.
Yeah.
Super Mario Brothers 2, like the Japanese version. I've beaten
Are you
that.
kidding me? You played that?
Not only did I play that, I played the Game Boy Color version because it's included with Super Mario Brothers Deluxe.
That's cool. I didn't know it was a thing.
It's even harder than the regular version because it has a truncated screen.
That's true. That's true.
There is something that does make it easier. It does have a save function, so you have infinite continues.
Okay. Do you still have to beat it like 8 times for the real ending that says thank you?
They don't have that in that version.
Yeah, because that's
just
bullshit.
fucked up. That's just fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, that's like Ghosts and Goblins level fucked up because
yeah, like, beat the game again. Only it's even harder.
Hey, you know you spent all that money getting through this game. Well, fuck you, do it again, and with a shitty.
That's true. It was an arcade game. Yeah, that's horseshit. By the way, speaking of which, I forgot to mention I have legitimately beaten Ghouls and Ghosts.
Yeah, when we were playing it on the Genesis, we played that together.
Yep, and I also streamed it, so I actually did the whole thing by myself eventually later.
Yeah, that Genesis version is ace. If you ask me, that's the best version of that game.
It's very, very good.
Yeah,
and the music's good too.
Oh, it's Ghosts and Ghouls and Ghosts is all right. I love that game. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. But yeah.
Actually, you know what? Here's a good one. I beat Thumper.
Oh yeah.
That game is fucking hard. That game gets way hard.
Yeah.
You should see the worlds like 8 and 9. It's insane.
I dropped off with that. I need to get back into it.
Like I tweeted, like I think I tagged the devs. I was like, I beat Thumper, like tagged their company name, and they actually responded. They were like, only select few can like make it through this game. Like, well done. I was like, yo.
The developers are super cool.
That game is fucking brutal. I mean, that game is amazing, but it's so hard.
Yeah, no, that's almost that was a game that I would rather watch you play because you're good at that kind of thing.
No, it's not. It's a game you would rather watch the YouTube, cut out the million deaths in post video that I put up. You do not want to watch me actually play it because it would be not much different from you playing it. Like, I just kept hacking away at it.
Yeah. I think you can't really beat Super Mario Brothers 2 as there's not too many games that are harder than that.
That game's ridiculous.
That game is legendary even still. I can't think of too many games that even approach that game. And again, I didn't even beat the hard Famicom Famicom disc version of the game. I beat the Game Boy Color version with the save function.
Oh, and here's this. This isn't the game itself, but I've mentioned this before on the podcast repeatedly. But I unlocked and beat Amon in every Yakuza game, including 2 on PS2, which is fucking hard. Like, the fight isn't bad, but unlocking him is unreasonable. Because you have to beat every sub-story the good way, which includes the baseball and golf ones. You have got to YouTube Yakuza 2, original PS2, the baseball and golf sub-stories. They are insane. Like, for the baseball, the guy's like, I'm going to pitch you 20 pitches. Hit 10 of them. And the pitches are like, the ball's like spiraling in the air and like going in crazy pattern. Like, you can't follow this shit. And in golf, it's like, I want you to score at least X number of points in like a score attack for golf on, for some reason, it's called alien difficulty. So, like, the place where you score 100 points is on the blades of the windmill. And there's incredible wind, so you have to like hit the ball way off course, and the wind like arcs it back, but you also have to time the swing so you catch the blade as it's like perpendicular. It's fucking insane. It's like, it's unreasonable. And you also have to beat everyone in the Coliseum because you have to get every heat action in the game, which involves beating Komaki in the Coliseum, which involves beating everyone else in the Coliseum. And it also means getting missable heat actions. There are some one-time heat actions. Like, get the fuck out. And then there's the Mahjong. Don't even get me started on Mahjong, because that game's hard enough to do anyway. But in the sub-story, you're playing at, like, a handicap. This guy's losing. He's like, could you please help me recover? I'm like, oh, no. So I have to play Mahjong when I'm at a point disadvantage. Finally
so
unlocking him on
Mahjong
is the sweetest relief.
Don't you?
I'm sorry?
You know how to play Mahjong at this point, don't you?
I still don't quite understand how the scoring works, but yeah, I basically know how to play now.
It's similar to poker, I think, right?
In its own way, yeah. Like, you could get straights and matches, so there's some similarities in there. But yeah, like, actually beating Amon is the most satisfying thing, like, because it's over. It's so hard to unlock Amon in OG Yakuza 2. It's so hard. I was like sweating when Kiwami 2 came out, but they toned that shit down so much. Although the actual Amon fight was much harder in Kiwami 2, but unlocking him was like, anything's easier than the PS2 version.
Seriously. All right. Well, I think we explored that pretty well.
Yep.
Well, we're gonna wrap up for this week. We want to thank all of our fans who contributed questions. It's been very good with the comments, guys. You've been very engaged.
Yeah, really great with comments, and we still have 4 more questions. We actually got 1 question submitted this week. So we had 4, and now we have 4.
Keep them coming just the same, though.
Yeah.
Please keep us supplied with awesome topics by submitting questions of your own via the YouTube and Soundcloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs ups, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going. You can also catch us on Tuesdays on our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week in our lives. Finally, you can friend me as vysethebold on pretty much anything.
And you could follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And finally, if you are interested in seeing my videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, or getting in conversations with me and other patrons on Discord, then perhaps consider swinging by my Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/LotusPrince.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you next week. Have a great week.
Until next time, everyone.
Bye-bye.